Shalom and welcome back. We are delighted to have you with us one more time this week for another of our video logs, our interviews with members of Beth Tikva. Although some have not been members, we're delighted to welcome them anyway as they are integral part of our community. But today we have a gentleman whom you have seen a lot. He sits in the back of the room when the shul is full, a member of our congregation for a number of years, that I personally knew little about. So I'm so happy that you've agreed to be with me. How are you, Mitchell?
I'm very good, and thank you for doing this whole program. I've seen a lot of them, and you do a great job, so I'm honored. Thank you very much.
You're very kind, and I certainly hope I'm not going to disappoint this week either. I'm not from. I don't know if you're familiar with the theory about 6 degrees of separation. Somehow we're all interconnected. In the longest span would be 6 degrees of separation, and you reminded me that we have a connection in that my son Daniel, the rabbi, served the congregation in upstate New York, where you hail from. Where is that?
Well, I'll get into my sort of exciting biography in a minute, but I spent the last, up until we came down here for the seasons, last 28 years in upstate New York. But before that, I lived in a variety of places. I grew up in the metropolitan area of New York City. I was born in New York City and raised in Yonkers, which is nearby. And I love upstate New York, but to fast forward a little bit, I'll get into more of this later, but the winters got to be a bit tough, particularly for my wife. So that's kind of what drew us down here initially. And we've grown to, get very, very attached to this place too. But we're still very close to the people in New York. We had a house, which we sold last summer, but we do plan to go back seasonally, but we couldn't do it this year. So I'm enjoying a Florida summer this year, and for the first time, 12 months duration.
Wonderful, wonderful. So tell me, how come you were born in New York? What's the story behind that?
My family, as I was discussing with you earlier, we took the elixir, I guess, that says to a lot of Ashkenazim Jews, if you're going to go from Eastern Europe around the turn of the century and you want to eventually go to Naples, Florida, you need to go through the Northeast or the Midwest. So in my case, the family did both. My grandfather came over, I think in 1904. He didn't want to be drafted into the Russian army, and he left and by himself. He had some cousin, I believe, to join in New York, but he earned enough money to to send passage for my grandmother and my aunt to come 2 years later. They came by themselves on a freighter. And so that's where my father got, and his family got sort of based in New York City. But fast forward a couple of, about 20 years, I guess, my uncle, my father's brother, it's a long story. It's part of family lore, and I'll save that for some other occasion. But anyway, he got admitted into the University of Minnesota. And then my father followed him to the University of Minnesota, where my mother's family, and I'll pick up their story, had come from Lithuania, again, around the turn of the century. And as I was saying yesterday, neither of my family or I know anything about life before the emigration. There's just lost in time. I don't have anything other than partly in Ukraine and partly Lithuania. But in any case, my mother's family settled in northern Wisconsin, really small town, where her father ran a movie theater. And she was a very, accomplished young lady, and she eventually went to Carleton College, which is near Minneapolis. But she found after a year or so there were no Jewish men and no Jewish life whatsoever. So she transferred to Minnesota, University of Minnesota, where she met my father. And eventually they got married and they moved back to New York City or New York area. And that's kind of the beginning of my association. But
What did your father do then?
my father and my mother, actually, she's got a unique story too. We're both doctors. And my mother was, a pioneering lady. There weren't many women doctors back then, but she, wanted to do it, and she did it. And my parents were both doctors. My father was a dermatologist, And my mother never really practiced in private practice, but she worked through the school system and the state health system in the state of New York for many, many years. And she, they both, I had a very fortunate childhood in terms of education and just kind of idyllic atmosphere. We lived in a nice neighborhood, and it wasn't particularly, and I don't regret it being very different because it was just the way it's supposed to be. But my mother, particularly getting into the Jewish aspect of my background, she really felt, my father identified Jewish, but was very unengaged as far as observance. And my mother really made sure her children all got a Jewish education and Jewish exposure. We went to summer camp at Camp Blue Star. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Yeah, terrific place. And she was a doctor there, actually. And I was there for 4 or 5 summers. And I have a lot of positive associations there. But also she made sure we got to Hebrew school and all that good stuff. This is besides while she was also, conducting a professional career. When I look back. I'm sorry?
How many siblings?
2. I'm the youngest of 3.
Right.
Supposedly I'm spoiled. I guess I admit to that. But anyway, I have a brother who's 5 years older and a sister who's 3 years older.
Right. So tell me, what did you end up doing with your life?
Well, initially I had terrific education and I had some influential teachers. I went to a good small college in Pennsylvania, and I decided to pursue some of the interests that this teacher in high school had given me, which were largely humanities, cultural. And one of them was theater, or drama, I guess you should say, and also Greek culture in particular. So I was thinking today is exactly 50 years ago. I decided I needed to do something different and not be so bland. So I decided to try out for a theater production. And I was a complete novice. I knew nothing, and I was a jerk, really. The audition was terrible. But unbeknownst to me, I was cast in the cast next day. I really was shocked because I knew I had done a lousy job, but turned out they didn't have enough people to cast the play. So the guy, there's a professor who eventually became a really good friend of mine, did something different. He started a theater workshop, and that's what kind of got me going in that interest. But I should mention too that while I was doing that, I was also taking courses in Greek history, Greek drama, and I actually took ancient Greek. And I realized, I don't know how many people know this, but original 4th, 5th century Greek drama is a religious experience. It was in theater festivals, Dionysian festivals, and to me, that's what it became. It was a very, very, and it still is really, social sort of, not too different from a great, religious service. And so I really became attracted to that. And I majored in English, but I eventually got a master's program in drama. And the idea was at that time to be practical. In other words, do some directing and acting and particularly playwriting, but also maybe go into the critical aspect of it, the academic aspect of it. And I eventually went on to PhD program, and that's where kind of the track of career got off the track, because I really got disenchanted with just being an academic. I just didn't want to be a professor, is what it amounted to. I still love theater, but I didn't really want to be a professor. So I had some bar mitzvah money and some other funds built up, and I got interested in investing. And through a fluke chance, again, it's a kind of a story, but it's not worth going into, I was hired by Merrill Lynch out in San Francisco. And so I became a stockbroker. This is 1978. And so I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. That's what I do basically for my living. But I kept my interest in theater. And for many years, I was doing it on a kind of hobby basis. I did some acting, I did some directing, I wrote some plays. I wrote some one-act plays. That was always an interest of mine, was playwriting. But to me, that's the hardest thing of all, particularly if you read Kohelet, there's nothing new under the sun. That was always very intimidating. It still is, how can I add to something that's, very cliched or it's been done before? But anyway, people keep doing it. But
I remember just about a year or so, you had I think it was a one-act play that was staged.
Yes, it was a full-length play, actually. And that was, again, I won't say problem, but my main challenge as I got into playwriting was developing plots. I think I'm pretty good with dialogue and with character, but my plots were just kind of really not, dynamic. So I decided to use a plot that already existed. I took the play and the movie. It's not a play, but it's a movie and a book called The Maltese Falcon.
Sure.
And I transferred it to Marco Island. So I made a plot it uses a lot of the history here on Marco. There was a very important archaeological dig in the 1890s that discovered some important Indian artifacts. And I made a fictional object that created a lot of mayhem in terms of people stealing it. There's a murder that takes place, and there's an investigator, a private investigator who has to solve the situation. So it sort of, I showed it to some people. I had a lady who runs a theater here who encouraged me to write it, but when I wrote it, she didn't show any interest. I didn't really know what was going on. But anyway, it languished for 3 or 4 years. And then I showed it to a friend of mine, and he was like, well, you should do this. So actually, I wrote it in 2015, but it wasn't until last year that the production really got underway. And I had some friends, we read it, a live reading. And again, the enthusiasm was very real. But I directed it and found a place to do it, which was very, very, very important, because it ended up being at the History Museum down here. Right, it was a good location in terms of the subject matter of the play. And we had 4 performances, and we got like 500 audience members total, which exceeded my expectation. It really went great. And talking about Beshared or being fortunate, the show ended the end of February, early March, and 10 days later, the world shut down. No shows anywhere. They would have had to cancel everything. I was just so fortunate, and it was luck, right, because we planned it a year beforehand. We didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, but so that was very rewarding. And I'm in the process now of writing another play, kind of a sequel, and who knows where that'll go. And who knows when you can do shows again. But it's enjoyable. It's that's really, to me. I'll fill in some more details if you want in a minute, but to me, that's the main lesson I would tell anybody from my experience is if you have an interest you want to do, don't give up. Just eventually it just gnawed at me to do something, and I did it. It's certainly not great art. It's not a great thing, but people really like doing it, and I got a lot out of it. So just keep at it. It's a really simple advice, but I think it's really important.
Perhaps there's an idea brewing there, because we had a person who taught us how to write ethical wills, and it was quite interesting. Perhaps we could have a couple of sessions, workshops, in how to create a little play, how to put together a play. Maybe if we inspire enough of our congregants, we could have an evening of short plays, written and produced in-house. Something for you and I to maybe develop over the course of the next few months before the world reopens.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. A piece of this story is that I did nothing in theater for many, many years, but I resumed activity about 5 years ago. And one of the first efforts I did was I was in a 2-person play with Karen Ezrine, who I didn't know ahead of time was a member of our shul. I don't know if she still is, but anyway, she was at the time. So there's a lot of people from Beth Tikva came to see us in that show. So I was very grateful, and I think they enjoyed it. I hope so. But we had a great time doing it.
Yeah, again, maybe we should look into that for the future. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Yonkers. I know Yonkers in Westchester County. I used to live in Pelham Manor. So I went to Yonkers every day to go to the seminary.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a great play, right? Lost in Yonkers.
That's right. Neil Simon, yeah.
Simon, yes, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your family, your wife, yourself, your children.
Sure. Well, there was a little bit of it was a huge break in my life in the late 70s. No, I'm sorry, late 80s. in terms of my Judaism, I was really pretty casual, I must say. And when I got married in 1974, I married a non-Jewish lady, and it wasn't a huge deal to me. I mean, I don't feel good about this, but that's the facts. And we didn't really discuss children at the time. We didn't even think we'd have children, but we did. And the idea, which again, I don't recommend anybody, if there's anybody listening, was that, oh, we'll let the children decide when they get older. Nah, big, bad idea. Thank you. I should have had somebody like you at the time. Anyway, that doesn't work. But eventually, again, a long story, I moved back from the West Coast to the East Coast. And this is kind of the amusing part of the story. I ended up in a very small town in eastern North Carolina, where literally the county, it's called Johnston County, maybe 45,000 people. If I would be very surprised if I wasn't the only Jewish person in that county. And it was an amusing existence. I was kind of a country squire. I had a few years of a brush with goyness, I guess. They were very nice people, but of course it was foreign to me in terms of New York background. But I kept being, this is the funny part, I kept being asked in a very courteous, respectful way if I wouldn't mind coming to school, to the churches around, because they wanted me to represent Judaism. What is Judaism? What's Hanukkah? Whatever. And I found myself sort of caught up short. I should know what I'm talking about, and I should represent myself well. So I kind of revised my education just to do that. There certainly were at the time, a very small community of Sikhs, the Sikh religion, who were doctors in the town. And there were far more of them than of me. So they had their, education session, and I would have mine. But in any case, that was, that period ended, my marriage ended, and it was a big, difficult time for me around 1990.
I have a great play for you to write.
Okay.
A Jew in eastern North Carolina. I mean, how many years were you there?
I was there 10 years.
There you go. You have 10 years to write about
Yes.
that experience, being the single Jew representing Judaism, etc. The travels, the tribulation of raising a family. Obviously, it didn't work well, but that's a play that you need to write.
Well, it is. I do have lots of anecdotes. And I think I could make it work. I've thought about it before doing that. I have a good effect of that town.
Put in there. That's very colorful, etc.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition of Sikhs who are professionals
Yes.
and punking North Carolinians and the Jew who comes from the West Coast. I would pay to see that.
Well, let's put it this way. I'll put in some good stuff and people won't know what I made up and what's true. So that'll be fun. But eventually,
I don't usually do endorsements in these pieces, but my wife and I are watching a series from Australia or New Zealand called 800 Words. It's a Peyton Place kind of a drama.
Uh-huh.
It's a guy whose wife dies and he ends up moving his family to an idyllic place in New Zealand. And he is a reporter, so every week he submits a piece that's only 800 words. And it's very interesting to see the dynamic and how these people interact. It sounds to me like there is perhaps a genre that you could pick up. There is this a network called the Up Network.
Okay.
On cable, something for you to do. So how many kids did you guys have?
So we had two sons, and they are terrific men. I won't even call them young men anymore. They're kind of middle-aged, but I eventually met my future wife. I was very fortunate, and that's when I moved back up to Northeast. I really felt like I needed to come back north. And it was a very difficult time. So I won't say any more about it. But I did, as part of that, resume my connection to Judaism. And her son, she had a son by a previous marriage also, came north with us. So basically I have 3 children, I feel like. And he has 2 children of his own. One of my children has 2 sons. I'm sorry, a son and a daughter. So I have 4 grandchildren. They're all about between 6 and 3 years old. And they live in El Paso, Texas, and Portland, Oregon. They're quite far away. And once, actually, I'm already considering going out there to visit. It's been too long, but I know it's,
I hope you do because I feel it for you.
yeah,
My wife and I, we have four grandkids, two in Tucson, Arizona, and two in Los Angeles.
yes.
We've not seen in over a year and a half.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And we are not even making plans because it's a situation that it's not, if we went there, they would ask us to quarantine for 2 weeks. There goes the vacation, right?
Yeah.
So I hope you get to do that. It's so sad that we are all missing out.
Yeah, my son in Oregon, as of this moment, I'm almost sure it's true. They are not quarantining in Oregon for people who arrive. So I think I'm okay there. And they moved out there just recently, so I haven't even been to their new home. But anyway, we're all, got to be careful. But in any case, when I went back to New York, picking up the sequence, the chronology, when I back up to New York, I really felt very strongly I wanted to reconnect with my Jewish identity. I joined a shul up there, where I'm still a member, and I got very involved by my standards and by my family standards. No one had ever done that before. So, I got involved with the men's club. I was chairman of various committees, including the cemetery committee. And there's plenty of stories there, man. I'd come home and tell my wife the stories, and then she couldn't believe it. But
Another play.
yeah, that's another play. And it's the Russians are key players in that one. We had a lot of Russian immigrants, and I'm still shaking my head that they were just very different. Let's put it that way. But in any case, my sons, and this is the part, where I can maybe ask for your guidance a little bit. They're terrific children, terrific people, but they don't have much spiritual life. And I think that's pretty true of their generation, actually. But they're not. I wrote them a sincere letter, and I said, I'm not going to dwell on this. This is about 10 years ago. And I just told them how important Judaism was to me, and as spiritual values were to me, and tzedakah was to me. So I think they kind of took it to heart, but they never really talked about it with me. So I don't know if you have any perspective there about how I can not necessarily make them Jewish, but at least give them some spiritual values. It's very, it's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to send you a copy of a couple of sermons that I've circulated with my students at Beth Tikva that speak exactly to that phenomenon. And
Okay.
more important, I invite anybody in our congregation who's going to listen to us through this recording to share with you any suggestions, because we have people, of course, who have similar experiences. Don't believe everybody has a perfect life either. And
Yeah.
they have dealt with this, with issues that are much harder to deal with, issues of sexuality, identity, etc. And I have to tell you how amazed and how proud I am to know how well most of my congregants have adapted. So I invite them all to share with you, to get to know you also personally and share with that. But you and I can schmooze a little bit more off camera.
Okay.
I can suggest some things. Where did life take them? What are they doing?
Well, actually, again, very interesting. My son, who's in Oregon that I just mentioned, at an early age, well, first of all, there's a tradition in my family, 4 generations now, of physicians. And he has continued that. So at a very early age, he was like 13 or 14, he decided he wanted to be a doctor. And I have no science background, neither does my ex-wife, but I totally encouraged it. And he has become a top-notch surgeon and also researcher, literally looking for a cure for cancer. So he is a very, very accomplished young man. He's just finished a fellowship at Sloan Kettering in New York, which means that it took 14 years from when he graduated college to get it all complete. So he's now finally on this, his road. I'm sorry?
It must be about 34, 35.
He's 30, just turned 37, yes. He took a year off here and there. But anyway, so he's, got a very deep involvement, and I think he'll be at OHSU, that's Oregon Health Sciences University, for many years. But my other son, actually, I remember I had a teacher in college, the same guy I talked about earlier, and when we were graduating, I said, I wonder what all these people will be in their class. And he says, well, usually it's a doctor, lawyer, teacher. So it's turned out to be true. And my other son, became a teacher out of college, and he got a PhD in economics. And his name is David, and he was at George Mason University. But about 3 years ago, he decided he wanted to become a lawyer. We're doing all three, and he's at Columbia. Of course, he's not really at Columbia now because no one's at school. But he's in his third year, and I believe, and he wants to go into being a public defender. So, mazel tov to him.
You know what? Again, my oldest son, who's now 35, is a public defender
How's that so?
in Arizona. He has a degree from Penn State in Greek studies and economics. See how the parallels continue to expand?
Amazing.
I do not have physicians in the family, although my wife would have loved to have been one. But see, look, these young men seem to be very, very bright and very promising. And
Yes.
I find that as they grow up and they mature and they find ultimately their way in life, they also find spirituality. I've had a lot of congregants in the sciences, particularly in medicine and in oncology, who after a while realized they are not the center of the universe.
Yeah.
Not revolve around them, and that their knowledge, their abilities, etc., are always limited, and they sort of try to look for that infinite power in the world, in the universe, and
Yeah.
become not necessarily religious, but certainly more spiritual.
That's good to know.
Because again, as we mature, we grow older, we realize, unlike Joseph, who thought he was the center of everybody's universe, we certainly are not, right? And there's something bigger than ourselves out there, if not someone out there. So be patient. Don't ever give up.
Good.
Yeah, great kids, great kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how are you keeping busy here in Southwest Florida?
Well, I meant to tell you yesterday. This is the only thing I've done, but my wife and I have been. I should back up a step because one of the few downsides or disadvantages of the play I did last winter was that my wife's life was very much disrupted. It was a change in her routine that was. She appreciated that I was getting this done, but it was not fun for her. So we have the reverse situation in the last 6 months. We are just the two of us, and it's been. I read somewhere that there's a lot of new divorces because people are living close together all the time. Well, thank God it's not happened to us. We're getting along fine. So that's one thing. But secondly, here on Marco, we're kind of able to be safe, but also not shut in. So we ride bikes a lot, do jogging, but the main kind of daring thing I do is play softball. There's a very active softball group around here, and people keep social distancing, and it's a lot of fun. But lastly, the last thing we've done in the last 4 weeks is we've taking online Spanish lessons, which has been, it's terrific. It's a great varsity tutors. You can do it all online, and we can do it. My wife and I can do it together, and it's lots of fun as well as, of course, very educational. See if our minds still work pretty well.
Well, one of the things people have suggested in the last 10 to 12 years in the area of brain development and Alzheimer's and all that is that if people are able to pick up new skills as they age, particularly language and music, the plasticity in the brain is I guess, stimulated or whatever. And
Yeah.
you do usually postpone or delay any possibility. And the later those things start, the better off we all are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned music because the other, project that we've talked about is taking piano lessons. We've each took it, 100 years ago, but it was more easy and natural to go for Spanish. We'll do one thing at a time, but that's a great idea.
Absolutely. And if you ever need help or additional tutoring, both my wife and I are natives. As you know, from Colombia,
Yes.
an educator. In fact, immediately after I'm done with you in our interview, I have an hour session with my grandchild in Arizona via Zoom, where
Uh-huh.
I'm teaching them a little bit of Hebrew and a little bit of Spanish as well. So again, we all try to make the best of the situation and find whatever silver linings there are, correct?
Absolutely. And I feel very, very fortunate. My job is not dependent on the outside, going out. So basically, both of us, my wife and I, are very lucky to have, compared to what many people have had to go through.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope that you continue to conquer all the challenges and surpass them. The most important one, of course, keeping your relationship vibrant and fresh, as I see you are. And as we are in the midst of the month of Elul, leading up to the high holidays, of course, your way go my very best wishes that you do indeed soon have the opportunity to travel to see your grandchildren and to meet my challenges of creating a workshop for prospective playwrights to write two plays. You have to write a play about North Carolina, but I think more colorful will be the play about running the cemetery committee for a synagogue.
I think you're right, but I'm going to finish the one I'm working on first, if that's okay. But after that, yes.
Us with attention deficit disorder, we do everything at the same time.
True.
Last good words for our members.
It's nothing that is brilliant, but love is what it is. I mean, friends, family, renewing and nurturing those ties. They're just the best. That's all that really matters. But everything else is secondary, but still gratifying.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Hopefully, you will be able to log in and join us for the high holidays in one way.
That's our plan. Yes.
And I'm sure somebody's going to reach out, if not many people, with their advice on how to bring your kids closer to a sense of spirituality and something beyond ourselves.
I would welcome that. Thanks for making the connection.
Of course. Well, Mitchell Isle, as in the Isle of Marco Island, thank you for taking the time for sharing with us a few moments this morning. People don't realize this, but this is our second take. Yesterday afternoon, we were beginning our interview and the electricity just went. Not much you can do when the router that runs your connections is out. So I'm glad we were able to pick up where we left last night.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll have great viewership in our channels and everything. Mitch, enjoy the rest of the day.
Same to you.
Be well. A la vista, amigo.
Muchas gracias.
Muy bien.
Igualmente.